Good morning, and everyone, welcome to our November 23 celebration of Baba's wonderful dancer, Margaret Craske. So without any further ado, Karen Talbot is going to do a nice bio for us. I've got a little video, and then we can do some remembering. So Karen.
Jai Baba, everyone. Margaret Crask's Persian name that Baba gave her was Zulika, and she was also known as Meher Baba's dancer. She was born on November 26th, which is today, but in 1892 in England. She was the daughter of Edmund and Hannah Craske. She had two sisters, Dorothy and Olive. Margaret was very athletic. She began dancing when she was 14 years old and was considered a prodigy. In 1918, she began dance lessons with the renowned Enrico Cicchetti. In 1920, Diaghilev, a Russian promoter of the arts, hired her. She had an extended career as a ballerina. Her career came to an end when she damaged her Achilles tendon. So she became Cicchetti's assistant, and when Cicchetti retired in 1932, she took over teaching at his studio. Between 1929 and 1931, Margaret lost everyone she valued. Her mother, her father, her fiancé, Diaghilev, and Anna Pavlova died. Margaret needed a place to recover and rest. On her way to the south of England, she began talking with the woman on the train. The woman told her about Meredith Starr's retreat in Devonshire and suggested Margaret visit. Margaret went to the retreat. When she arrived, she saw a photo of Meher Baba and asked who that was. 5 months later, Meher Baba came to London with several of his followers. In 1931, it was Margaret who opened the door for Meher Baba when he first arrived at the London home of Herbert and Kitty Davies' parents to begin his mission in the West. Of that first meeting, Margaret wrote, "He was standing at the foot of the steps leading to the front door, dressed in a thin white gown, a short furry coat, and a pink turban, and he was looking at the house very quietly. He passed in through the door and gave me a smile in passing. A little later, I went in to see him. I was very nervous, and I did not know how to address him. But as soon as I entered the room, I was completely won over by the love which seemed to permeate his whole personality." He spelled out on the alphabet board, "It was your love that brought me to the West." She saw him at that moment as a vision of gentleness, grace, and love that touched the heart immeasurably. Before that first day was out, she said, "I only knew from that moment whatever rough treatment he may have afterwards handed out, there has never been a moment's doubt as to his being the embodiment of love and life." Meher Baba asked her to come to East Chalicombe, where he was going after his London stay. She did on September 19th, 1931, for 4 days. She wrote, "Of the 4 days which I spent in Devonshire with him in the group, it is difficult to write. The whole time was invested with a dreamlike quality of pure love, timelessness, and great beauty." Near the end of 1931, she traveled to Paris with Meher Baba. Because she spoke French very well, Baba asked her to accompany him on the train to Marseille, where he and those with him would embark on a ship back to India. She had the compartment next to Baba's. He told her if he knocked 3 times, that meant "I love you." She was to knock back 3 times. This transpired throughout the night. In 1931, when they were at the station saying goodbye to Baba, who was leaving, Chanji said of Margaret, "She is a link type. Baba must have Margaret." The first time Baba asked her to dance, she was wearing a tight skirt, country boots, and there was no flat surface. To make things even more difficult, Kenneth Ross joined in with his bagpipes. The second time was in mid-April 1932. Margaret went to East Chalicombe to be with Baba. They met Baba in Santa Margherita in July of that year and stayed at the Villa Fiorenza, near Santa Margherita. Margaret wrote, Baba was in a playful mood. He made signs, and Chanchi translated that Baba said I should give him a dancing lesson. This was fun of the highest order. Chanchi took Baba's hand and brought him to class. I then took his hand and showed him a simple 1, 2, 3 hop step. No obstacles. He took it at once, and then hand in hand, we flew round the garden path. And I really mean flew. He could move as no one else has ever moved, with joy, freedom, rhythm. And I knew, without intellectualizing it, that dancing was, is, and always will be a part of God. The next time she danced for Baba, she had no preparation. She was wearing heavy clothing, and there was an old gramophone with broken records. She danced around the tables for 1/2 hour and felt like a goat. Going to India. Meher Baba returned to India in August 1932. In February 1933, Margaret was one of the first Westerners to accept his invitation to come to India for several years. They were sent back home after 3 weeks. Then Meher Baba invited them to Nasik in December 1936. This time they stayed until July 1937. He returned to the West with them by ship. Mara and others also were on that trip. Meher Baba placed Margaret in charge of Rustam and Frainie's son Falu when she returned to England. She was to see to his education and care. That would have been one of Meher's brothers. In 1939, she received an order to come to India immediately and bring Falu with her. This was very difficult because of the war. She was forced to leave her money in England. She eventually left England and brought Falu with only 2 10-pound notes in her shoes. She arrived in Colombo, Sri Lanka. The money left in her shoe paid for their passage to Bangalore, where they met Baba. Margaret spent the next 7 years in Baba's ashram. She was given the job of reading the paper to him and then reading other books, including Agatha Christie, P.G. Wodehouse, Rick Stout, Tolkien, and others. She was also given the task of teaching Mara and Mani to swim. She said Mara learned to swim due to her one-pointed devotion to whatever Meher Baba asked of her. Margaret was also in charge of caring for many of the animals in the ashram. In 1946, Meher Baba asked her to return to London and then go to the US. On May 1st of that year, she traveled with Baba and Kandavarya to New Delhi, and then took the train to Ahmednagar. When she arrived in Bombay, she was Nariman and Arnabas's first guest at their home, Ashiana. She stayed with them for 10 days while waiting for a berth to England. Baba told Margaret in India prior to her traveling to the US, she would lay cables for him. Baba opened his hand and then spelled out on his alphabet board, "You must go. I have made you my link in America." Margaret understood the meaning of this when she realized how many in the world of dance she told about Meher Baba. In 1946, she arrived in New York by chartered airplane after briefly going to Canada to obtain the appropriate visa. At that time, she was 54 years old. She was invited by Anthony Tudor and Lucia Chase to give lessons to their dance company, the American Ballet Theater. By New Year's Day, 1947, she was teaching dance in San Francisco. In 1950, the American Ballet Theater hired her, and the Metropolitan at that time joined together to form the Metropolitan Opera Ballet School. From 1968 through 1983, she also taught at the Manhattan School of Dance, so her career was varied. Meher Baba visited the U.S. in 1952. Margaret came to the center at that time. After the historical gathering, she had to leave to resume her teaching responsibilities. Then, after the May 24th, 1952 car accident in Prague, Oklahoma, Delia de Leon phoned Margaret and told her that Baba wanted her to come to Prague. The next day, she flew there. Baba asked her to exercise the muscles on the right side of his body without moving the bone structure. 3 times a day, she worked on Baba's muscles on his right side and then did what she could for Mara and Elizabeth. When they returned to Myrtle Beach, Margaret stayed and helped while Baba, Meru, Mani, and others were there to recuperate from the accident. When Baba arrived in New York in 1956, Margaret sat at the main table with Baba and others at the Longchamps restaurant dinner in New York City. She attended the program at Myrtle Beach and was accompanied by her dancers. And at that time in 1956, she was also at the Holiday Lodge with her dancers prior to Baba's visit to Australia. In 1958, she again was at the Meher Spiritual Center during Baba's visit there, and she told 3 of her dancers, Tex Hightower, Peter Saul, and Don Mahler, to carry Baba's chair at the center. Helen Bunty Kelly, who was Scottish, taught the dancers the Highland Fling, and they performed this dance for him. On Friday, May 30th, Kitty, Delia, and Margaret went to Baba's house for a final goodbye. For a few seconds, he gestured for the 3 women to stand before him, and he put his hand to his heart, pointing to each of them who had been with him since 1931. Later years, in 1962, Margaret returned to India and attended the East-West Gathering. In the dance world, she became the director of the Metropolitan Opera Ballet School and remained there until the school closed in 1968. She then joined the Manhattan Festival Ballet as ballet mistress until 1983. When it closed, she moved to Ballet School New York, where she taught for the next 3 years until her retirement in 1986 at the age of 94. During those years, she also taught at the Theater and School at Jacob's Pillow, Massachusetts, and the Juilliard School of Music and Dance. In 1986, Margaret retired and moved to Myrtle Beach and lived at Happy House on the Meher Spiritual Center. She was a member of the board of directors of the Meher Spiritual Center for many years. She shared stories of her life with Baba with many Meher Center visitors. She died on February 18th, 1990 in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Her ashes are interred at Upper Meherabad next to those of Elizabeth Patterson. What Baba said of Margaret. When they first met, Baba said of Margaret, "I had not expected to find you so fast." Of her, Baba said, "You are a jewel of a disciple." She wrote 2 books about her life with Baba. The Dance of Love was written in 1980. Still Dancing with Love was written in 1990. She was also the author of 2 books, which are standard references on the Cecchetti technique. In 1950, she wrote The Theory and Practice of Allegro in Classical Ballet, written with C.W. Beaumont, and then she wrote The Theory and Practice of Advanced Allegro in Classical Ballet with Dara de Morada. In her obituary, Dance Magazine said she greatly influenced how ballet technique is to be taught. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Karen, that's beautiful. Thank you. Oh,
I
well,
have a question
yes.
for Karen, maybe, or anybody here. If they know the anecdote in 31 when Baba was staying at the Davies house, I remember there was the one thing that happened was Kitty, I think, well, Kitty conferred with Margaret about Baba because they were both first meeting Baba, and they're like their first impression. But I can't remember which one of them said something that was really precious about who Baba was, who they thought he was, or something like that. Does anybody remember how that came about?
I remember one of them saying, weeping, and saying, "He's so beautiful. He's so beautiful." It might have been even in her, but I don't remember which one.
That might have been it. That might have been it. Yeah, yeah. It was just this outpouring, of spontaneous. They had to tell somebody else how they felt. Yeah.
Thank you, Ron. Yeah. There are a number of videos actually. I think there's one that Margaret did at the center, like in 76 or something. I was there for that. And it was the first time I ever had, I think she told them to lock the door when she was ready to start. And I was just dumbfounded, a little hippie girl by that. But it's funny, I have a ballerina right now, a nurse that I'm teaching cardiac information to. And it's such a great thing to do because she has incredible discipline, self-discipline. It makes it so much easier to teach somebody like that. She's got a lot of interest, but the discipline seems to be the thing that really works in terms of not learning. Well, I have a video here. It's a video of Margaret, and I thought it would just take a minute and take a look at her. The opening, I have to see. I'm trying to remember. I keep clicking myself off. I'm trying to remember who wrote that, but we'll see. I know that Buzz took this introduction that was written about Margaret and made a song, and that's kind of what the background is. So give me a second here and we'll get started. So these are the words: dancer dancing.
Dancer dancing to his word, footsteps winging as a bird, abandoned flight of blazing light, whirling in divine romance. Dancer, dancer, dance his dance to the drum of God men's heart, in which all music has its start. From creation's soundless singer to every gesture, every glance, dancer dance, dance. In the bower of his smile, you may want to rest a while, but keep on dancing, dancer, please not to rush. His dance can never cease, not to rush. His dance can never cease. Dancer dancing to his word, footsteps winging as a bird, abandoned flight of blazing light, whirling in divine romance. Dancer, dancer, dance his dance, dance his dance, his dance, dance his dance, dance his dance, his dance, his dance, dance his dance, his dance, dance his dance, dance his dance, his dance, his dance. Not to rush his dance can never cease. Dance his dance, his dance, dance his dance, dance his dance, his dance, his dance, dance his dance, his dance, oh dance his dance, his dance, his dance, his dance. Not to rush his dance can never cease, never cease. Dancer dancing to his word, footsteps winging as a bird, abandoned flight of blazing light, whirling in divine romance. Dancer, dancer, dance.
Jay Baba. I think I had a little bit of memory of Margaret and her life. I know I was there for some of it. And I'm sure some people here also were there for some of Margaret's time. So anyway, if you got anything you want to share about Margaret, I'd love to hear it. There's a photo in there of Margaret sitting down and Kitty coming down the front steps at Dilruba. And I know that years ago when we were at the center and Margaret and Kitty were there, it was kind of, Kitty would sit close to the porch where Margaret was in that chair. And then Margaret would be kind of across the drive a bit and should be in her chair. And I was there with my former husband and we were standing where Kitty was, but we couldn't kind of get close because there were so many people. And I think we just started, he said to me, well, let's go over and talk to Margaret, because I don't even think he had met Margaret. And so we were going to do that. And Kitty saw us start to move and she reached out and took my husband's hand and said, no, stay here with me. And then my husband kind of got down, on his knee so he could talk to her. And it was beautiful. No, don't go there. Come here to me. So they were quite a pair, the two of them. And there is also a video out there called, I'm trying to remember, something 3. Does anybody remember? It was Margaret, Kitty, and yeah, Karen, do you know? You're muted, darling girl.
Frivolous 3.
Frivolous 3. Thank you, Rosalie.
Yeah, Rosalie has it, the Frivolous 3, and it was so touching that Baba called the 3 of them together and put his in 58 and put his hand on his heart. And I have to see, but basically said how they were with him since stayed with him since 1931.
And that was Kitty, Margaret, and Delia?
Delia, the Frivolous 3. He named them the Frivolous 3, like
Okay.
Rosalie said.
Yeah, I think I like that title. Rosalie, have you any thoughts? Anything you want to share?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One
good.
thing is in a film, I was trying to remember what film it is, but I think it's in San Francisco. At that he's jostling Margaret's shoulders, and then I think they edited it out, but he used to play this game with her where he'd pretend he was looking in a way, and then she'd look, and then he'd slap her on the face, and I swear I still can see the slap there. I guess they edited it, or maybe it deteriorated, but always her books are like these. I love pure children's books, not talk down children's books, but her books are this economy, this perfect economy of words. And and I'm sure she knows lengthy words, but she doesn't use them. And I love that. It's like, it's refreshing, just refreshing. I love her time when she speaks. They were on the Blue Bus tours, and they came to a very hot place, which I don't know where. It seemed like everywhere was hot in India when I was there. Anyway, they came there, and it was towards the end of the day, and it was so hot that they were going to sleep on the roof of this structure. But this farmer had brought his dying cow He's brought it, and the vultures were sitting along the edge of this building, I guess. And, that's where they were going to sleep. That was just it. So Margaret says she opened her umbrella so she'd have some protection while she slept. And she says, had I have 2 umbrellas, I would have opened them both. And I just, just her humor, and it's very interesting. My only contact with her was when a senator, I guess it was a federal senator, I can't imagine the worth of a South Carolina senator, anyway, my bias, but Jane Haynes was showing around the senator, and he was walking, strutting like a cock at the break of dawn, and Jane Haynes, I brought her a picture, an old picture of Zazu Pitts. So she lost her scenario with the senator. She lost it because she loved Zazu. Zazu gave her place up that Jane came instead of Zazu. She had a flat tire, whatever. Zazu was very important to Jane. And he noticed the disconnect. He kind of went, trying to steady himself. And then she went into her southerly, whatever, honey dripping mode, and Margaret, she was there too, and he was so into himself, he didn't notice other bodies. He almost like bumped her, and she shot him a look. I thought, don't mess with Margaret. It's like he was so oblivious, he didn't even feel it. He just kept strutting on, and, for the world, whatever, the universe. But anyway, I'm very grateful for Margaret. Phyllis Frederick loved Margaret so much, and they'd exchange murder mysteries. And I think one of the reasons why I like Margaret is she's so nobody in between, just you and God. And in that picture you showed, she's sitting with him, and they look like a couple of people in love that we see where it will go, but they were very happy where it was. She has a blue dress on, and that he jumped on her back that time. I mean, it's just amazing. Like playfulness with her, just outstanding playfulness. I just any thought of her, and I just admire that. And I saw it on a tea bag also. Avoid middlemen, deal directly with God. She was so much about that I think it's just her outstanding quality. Yeah, it's just quite something to even think of inheriting, Yeah.
Beautiful, Rosalie. Thank you. You made me think when she was writing that second book, I had been at Kitty. I guess I visited Kitty, and I was leaving, and I came out the front door instead of Kitty's office door, and Margaret was sitting on the porch, and there was a chair right next to her. So I immediately jumped right into it, of course. And she was writing about Baba coming through East Calicombe and how important that would be. That spot was very important, she said. And then I don't know how we got onto it, if I brought something up or somehow it came up. And she said to me, all we have to do is say his name to someone, or they might see his picture. And that's it. We have nothing to do with it, she said. We have nothing to do with it. She said, if the connection's there, That's all it'll take, his name, a photo, and we don't do anything. So that was a great thing as a young person, just new to Mayor Baba, to know that my responsibility ended with his name or his face. And you know how, I don't know, that it seemed at that time, I guess it was in the 70s and 80s, there was a huge influx. It just seemed that, certainly in my world, a lot of people would just see his picture and that was it, or read a little bit of the discourse and they were connected and hear his name. And I mean, it was just like a flood of people coming to Baba in the 70s. And it was important for me to know that I didn't have to say anything or do anything. I didn't have to give a sermon. I didn't have to give any kind of information. It wasn't about that so much. It was certainly heart to heart, as Baba wanted it, I think, to be. And
Ruthie, I thought of a funny one, because Baba did point out the young man, Mirwan Mehta, as having been Norina. I saw the indication in writing that they had, Anyway, so Margaret knew, and one time I guess she says, "You never liked me, did you?" To Mirwan Mehta. I don't know what age he was then, but can you imagine? You never liked me, did you?
that's great. Yeah, she was. Ron, do you have something for us?
Did you call on me?
I did.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to share a personal anecdote. It's really not so much about Margaret, although Margaret is really, I think, the star of this particular anecdote, and you'll see why, I think. So I went to the center in, I believe it was June of 72. I think it was my second trip there. And I came from New York, flew in to the old airport. Elizabeth picked me up and drove me to the center, which was, I don't think I had much contact with her before, or after. But nevertheless, she took me there, dropped me off at the gateway. I spent about an hour chatting about New York and what did I see when I was there, musicals or stage plays or something like that, with Jane. And at a certain point, Jane thought, I've been talking with this guy for a long time. Now it's time for me to do my work here at the gateway. And so she said, why don't you go into the center now? So I was walking out the door, and then Jane stopped me and she said, "So I didn't even ask you what you do." And I was living in Miami at the time, which is where I was born and raised and was living. What do you do in Miami? And I really couldn't say, because I didn't have a job. I didn't go to school. I was kind of just free floating and thinking that my ambitions were all related to spirituality, that was a new thing for me. And I had gotten basically caught up, my ego had gotten caught up in this spiritual idea. And I basically let go of any kind of worldly tasks that I needed to do. And I realized this when she said, "What are you doing?" I had nothing to say. I said, "Well, I'm not doing much right now." And so then as I walked into the center from the gateway, this thing revealed itself as sort of like a monster that had got hold of me. And I didn't know how I was going to get out of it. I was like caught somehow. And but nevertheless, so I was struggling with this from that point on for a day or two, until somebody suggested, "Why don't you go see Kitty?" And talk with her about it, because Kitty often offers people good advice. So I said, I jumped at that right away. I mean, there was no doubt about it. I needed to do that. So I called up Kitty and got an appointment. The appointment was for around noon, I think. And so on the way, I knew that Margaret was telling stories at the outside the library. I don't even know if there was a reading room. I don't think there was a reading room. It was just like the library. And it was a little porch there. And so there were several people there. And we were listening to Margaret tell stories about Bob and stuff. And it was getting on toward noon, and Margaret stopped. And I knew she was staying at Dilruba. And so I asked her if I could accompany there, because I was going to see Kitty. And she agreed. And I started walking. We were walking together, and it dawned on me that I was not going to be receiving the needed advice from Kitty. That was going to come from Margaret. And so Margaret says to me, basically, where are you from? What's your name? Where are you from? I got. And then she said, so what do you do there? How do you occupy your time? And I was kind of stumped, but I knew I had to be honest with her. And I said, well, right now I don't have anything. I'm trying to think of what I might want to do. And she said something very important. She said, what do you like to do? And I hadn't really thought of that as the motivator. But since she said it, I knew I had to be honest with her. And I said, I like to cook. And which was quite true. In fact, there was a restaurant that had opened just months or so before. And it was a restaurant that was serving healthy food, which appealed to me. And I went there right before I left for my travels in the earlier part of the year. I went there to see about getting a job there. And so I just talked about it with people, but I knew I was leaving. And I asked Baba if I should work there. And he said yes. But I was leaving, and I basically forgot about it. But when Margaret, so when I said I like to cook, Margaret said, oh, well, you should be a cook in a restaurant or a hotel. And then I connected the two things together, and I said, definitely, I should do that. And I have no idea if we talked about anything else after that. But I was right away, the whole thing for me was to get back to Miami and go to that restaurant and get a job. I was intent on doing that. And it just so happened that Steve Barry and Tony Griss were on the center at the time. And they were, for some reason, they were heading to Miami. And I got a ride with them. I mean, I think the next day, and I was supposed to stay there for 2 weeks at the center, but I cut it short by about a week. I went back and went to that restaurant probably the very next day after getting back. And I asked for, if there's any jobs. And they said, well, we have a job as the salad maker at night. That was one of the positions, salad maker. They sold a lot of salads, and they had one person that's what they took care of. So I wasn't interested in making salads or working at night, but I said, I'll take the job. I just wanted to get in there. I mean, that's what was that was available. So I said, yes. The next day before I started working there, I got a call from that restaurant, somebody at the restaurant, and they said, our assistant to the chef, the main chef, quit yesterday. Would you like to take that position? Which was cooking in the morning with the head chef and learning what she had to offer, which is what I did. And so I didn't make any salads there or work at night there. But for several years, I spent time working in this restaurant, and it was quite quite good. Baba's picture was up there. Probably 50 Baba lovers worked there over a period of about 3 or 4 years. It was unbelievable. This was in Miami, Florida. Anyhow, I know that's not that much about Margaret, but without Margaret and her practical help given in such just a natural way, it was key. It was key for me. I'll always appreciate it. So as far as all the things about Margaret, if you listen to this, the tapes of all the people who have spent many hours and many days and years with Margaret, the dancers that she connected with, you'll hear more about Margaret. There's so much about her and the way she went about, but I won't try to repeat that.
You know, Ron, hey Ron, it's Marta.
Yeah,
you know, that's a great story because for me, it shows how if you say yes to Baba when he's leading you, even if it's not what you think you want, that eventually it turns into what he wants, and it's a very beautiful thing. And that's such a good story. Thanks, Ron, for telling it.
You're very welcome.
Couldn't have said it better, Martha. It's so true. Yeah, wow. J. Baba, Ron, thank you so much. And Judy Robertson from Seattle. J. Baba.
Hey, Baba, everyone. December, not yet, November 26th today is Margaret's birthday, as was probably mentioned a minute before I came on. But it's stuck in my heart, and I'll get to that later. I'm a latecomer to everything these days, but I was a latecomer with Margaret Craske. But by Baba's grace, he had a connection for me with her. And my first trip to Myrtle Beach, you know, I was in India before I got to Myrtle Beach. But I've been with Baba since the day he dropped his body. But it was somehow I managed they had a place for me on my first trip to Myrtle Beach, which was, unbeknownst to me, the 30th anniversary of Baba's last visit in 1958. And the center had invited every person that was there in 58 and still living and wanted to come as a guest and a guest speaker. So there was everybody in the Baba world that had been there in 58 were there. But I had no idea. But I think I bought Margaret's book. I actually call her Miss Craske because I was so close to Tex, as it turned out. And you never said Margaret to him or any of the dancers. It was always Miss Craske. At any rate, anyway, I've lost my little string here. So I was there in 88, and I know I was, I'd read Miss Craske's book, Dancing with Love, back in 80 when it came out, and I was delighted with her through those pages. And the fact that she had somewhat recently, a couple years before, moved to Happy House meant I had a chance to meet her. And so I did. I went over there, and she was out on the porch at Happy House with about 10 of her dancers, and I was sort of the fly on the screen. There was not exactly a wall on the screen outside. And I think it was at the end of that session of being with Miss Craske that a young woman my age then, named Teresa, she was assisting Miss Craske. She was sort of, her assistant at that time. And she took me aside and said, Judy, so I had met her in '86 at Meherabad, and she remembered me and so forth. And she said, is there any possibility? She was burned out. It was a really intense time. And Miss Craske, taking care of her was not necessarily easy. And she said, is there any way that you could take care of her for a few days so I could get a respite? And I was like, I jumped at the chance. And so I ended up spending a lot of time at Happy House for the next week or two. And like from morning till night. And it was a wonderful immersion into the world of Miss Craske and her dancers, and heard so many stories and them reminiscing together about, as opposed to being on stage and telling them. And in that process, I felt a great connection with Tex Hightower, which then later developed. But during that time, and Rosalie is no longer with us. She's up anyway. Her apartment's here, and maybe she can hear. But hi, Rosalie. What she had said about Miss Craske saying to Marwan Mehta, you never liked me. Miss Craske was the one that so this is a couple of years before she passes away. So in her very late years, her frustration over the elegant way that Norina Machabelli, went through life. Miss Craske was a Sagittarius, and she's a straight arrow. It's like none of this fancy, putting on airs, etc. And she was very overtly critical often. and yet I went back recently and read an article called, I think, Through Norina in her second book, Still Dancing with Love, where she says very directly, Baba used every bit of these connections that Norina had with the royalty of Europe and so forth for his work. And anyway, she actually spoke so highly and respectfully and appreciatively of Norina and the role that she had played, the important role that she had played on so many different levels in Baba's advent. But I found her humor absolutely delightful. She was so playful. And that's what Baba loved most about Margaret. To him, he was, from Baba's view, it's definitely Margaret. From the dancer's view, it's Miss Craske. But Baba loved Margaret for her humor. And I think most of you know they had sort of this game between them for decades, where Baba would somehow get a hand around to one shoulder and tap on it, and she'd look that way, but he'd be the other way, and so forth. And it's even caught in one of the films on of Miss Craske and the Dancers, when Baba had just done that. Baba's part isn't shown on the film, but Miss Craske is so frustrated because here they are again, years later, and Baba's still always getting on top, always winning that particular game. But it was such a delightful game to them. And so to be able, I can't begin to express, those of you, I don't know if which Sally that is, but people have had a whole lot more experience, years of experience with Miss Craske than me, but even a little bit of time with her she was so light, she was so delightful. And I can imagine her, of course, I never had a chance to, see her dance, or some people took lessons, of our generation with her. But she's so light in character, so like a little nymph that's floating through. And on the other hand, she could be a taskmaster, and the kind of qualities actually that I'm thinking of are not dissimilar from Mani's, who could be utterly delightful, and also, chairman of the Upper Meherabad Trust, and totally upright for Baba. Anyway, I found her quite delightful, and so I met her just before I began what I call my India years, where I had the opportunity to try to learn how to be of minor service to Baba over in India, and was there for almost 15 years as a part-time resident. And during those years, Tex would come over consistently every year well, actually what connected me with Tex was I ended up meeting with Graham Stonebridge, who lives up in British Columbia. And we planned, he said, I've got a place. And I said, well, I've got a guest. I'll invite Tex. And so I invited Tex, and he came and stayed in my little house that I'm in right now. And for, I don't know, a week or 10 days in Seattle, and we'd give talks in the evening and so forth. But he and I would stay up until 3 a.m. almost every night. Him telling stories, endless and wonderful stories, and us laughing. It's Tex and Miss Craske and I are all Sages with it and have birthdays in the same week. And Ruthie too. And that's this week actually coming up. And so so we had this natural chemistry, Tex and I. And when he would come to Meherabad, he would, I'd spend time with him. But when he would leave, he would always give me Indian, he'd give me rupees, a good number of rupees, to buy a very large, beautiful garland. So on the 26th of November, I would go up the hill to Miss Craske's grave with the very large garland that Tex was offering to Miss Craske on her birthday every year. So that's why today sort of is, it's in my memory very strongly, when many other things aren't these days, because of all of the years of buying garlands for Miss Craske on her birthday. But it was a way that Tex would come in early November, but leave, about the 20th, just before her birthday, and then I would buy the garland and put it on. So we have that kind of almost, yeah, that heart garland connection with Miss Craske, and remembering how delightful, insightful, powerful, meek, and fun she was. So anyway, that's my little vignette of memories of Miss Craske in her final years, and she was still dynamite back in the late 80s. And go Miss Craske. What a beautiful soul Baba created in her. Jai Mehr Baba.
Jai Baba, Judy. It's Baba time for those that think of Baba at 12 o'clock and dress your soul. Yeah. Oh gosh. I took a friend to the center one time for her first trip, and this girl was kind of dynamite, and we fortunately had this connection to Margaret, and we got to sit out with Miss Craske on the porch at Kitty's, and I don't know if we visited or ate, whatever we did, Margaret had this beautiful scarab ring on her finger, and I don't know which one of us said, oh, what a beautiful ring that is. And she said, oh, yes. She said, Baba gave it to me. And there was, I guess, a point where, the women just were so in love with Baba. And they would say things like, when you were Rama, I was Sita, right, Baba? Right, I was Sita when you were Rama. Or whenever you were, and they would go through this whole thing. And Miss Craske was just totally just had enough of that. So one day, I guess Baba came out and they started this again. And she said, Baba, I would like to be engaged to you, but you'll never have to marry me. And the next day, Baba came out with this beautiful scarab ring and put it on her hand. And that was the ring that we were admiring. So years passed. Now Margaret's living in Happy House. And I think it was my husband, my previous husband, and I went in to see her. And I said something about, oh, Miss Craske, so good to see you. And I told him about the ring. And she said, oh, no. She said, you weren't supposed to tell anyone about that. So it ended up, it was in her book, but, I was like, oh my God, what have I done? What have I done? She was just a character. She was just the most wonderful character. Ron, you had something else. Go ahead, Ron.
Unmuted. Okay, good. So there is this one anecdote about Margaret that I often have shared in Baba meetings and things. And I don't know if it was in her book. I would imagine it would be. It seemed like it would be a very important thing for her to share with others. Or I heard her say it. Probably it's in the book. But I think I want to repeat it here and from my own memory of it, which is that during the time in the 30s when a lot of the Western women were there, including Norina and Elizabeth, I believe those were the two people that Margaret was hearing on a regular basis, that they were having these visions and dreams of Baba. She was like, they would tell each other these things. And eventually, she was wondering why she never had a dream about Baba or had a vision of Baba. And it was kind of bothering her. And this one day when it was on her mind, Baba approached her and said, what's on your mind? And she said, well, Baba, Norina and Elizabeth are telling these stories of having these visions of you, or they dream about you. And she says, I never had a dream about you or a vision of you. And Baba said, oh, yeah. Is that true? You never had that? yeah, I never had that. I was wondering why not? She says, well, that's an easy answer. You don't need to have those. Some people need those things, but you don't need that. So you didn't get it. To me, that's pretty important for anybody to get a good understanding of what Baba's ways.
Oh, that's great, Ron. Thank you. Yeah, I hear that. Hmm. Betty, you're kind of quiet. Do you have anything?
I never met her and didn't know. I don't know. Enjoying the stories. She sounds wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you, dear.
Here, and I bet you have stories with Margaret Craske.
Actually, the only times I actually was with her that I remember was going to Happy House to hear her talk. And she was extremely entertaining. But other than that, I really heard mostly about her from her dancers.
My good friend Jeannie McDonald, magician Huey's wife, found out about Baba through. She was a ballet student of Margaret's in high school, and that was her Baba connection, was the learning about Baba from Miss Craske, who lived in a hotel at that time, and it seemed that when at the appropriate time, she'd invite, when a person was interested, she would invite them to come to her room, and she would talk to them about Baba and show pictures. So yeah, that's a secondhand story.
That's a great story. Well, I happened to be a member of Al-Anon for years and years and years. And when I lived in Richmond, the helpline needed somebody to drive someone to an Al-Anon meeting because they were in a wheelchair. So my husband and I said, we'll be glad to go get her. And we did. We went and picked up a woman, and, she got in the back seat, and we were on our way, and she was chatting, I guess we talked to each other, trying to figure out, little things about each other. And she said, you just never believe, to look at me now in a wheelchair with MS, that I was a ballet dancer in New York. And we were like, oh, isn't that amazing? I can't even remember her name anymore. Isn't that just astounding? That's just so wonderful. And she said, yes. She said, I don't even know how she got around to it, but she said, I had a wonderful teacher. Her name was Miss Craske. And we both went, what? And so she talked some more, and she was just, you could tell she loved Miss Craske. This woman was just so impacted by Miss Craske. So the next week we were supposed to pick her up and take her again to the meeting. And I got that photo. It was in the slideshow of the calendar of Margaret sitting, and behind her is a photo of Baba over here. So I ripped that out of my calendar. I didn't want to, but I figured this woman would treasure this picture of Margaret. So I gave it to her, and she was just flabbergasted and so moved. But it was amazing. I don't know what that connection was about. Anyway, I'll leave it there, but it was really something to actually run into her. And then when Margaret was dying, when Margaret died, I was on the center when Margaret Craske died. And I guess I was in the bungalow. All the particulars are not so important, but it was late and it was raining. And maybe I was in the original kitchen. And a woman came just kind of flying and floating in out of this rainy night, and said to me, these are the flowers that were in Miss Craske's room when she passed just a half an hour ago, and I brought them here, and I'd like to take them into the lagoon cabin. Would you like to help me? And I said, yes, I'd love to help you. And I guess we rearranged them a little bit and changed the water and probably different faces, whatever. But she tended and told me what to do, and we did just that. And then we carried them into the lagoon cabin. And the way she spoke, it was as if she were in Baba's presence. When we walked in the door, she floated in the door as the grace of a dancer. And she walked in and she said, well, Baba, you've taken your lady. And we put the flowers around and we just stayed for a few minutes. And then I think I left her in there. And I don't know if it was Kelly, a bunny or not, but it was just amazing. I mean, I could feel Baba in the room when she walked in and said, well, Baba, you've taken your lady. So she was just something you can't describe, I guess. Anybody else? And those photos, I forget if it was Rosalie brought or Judy brought up about how Baba, just always had these games with Margaret, and that beautiful, there's that segment where he's pushing and pulling her and pushing her and pulling her and pushing her. And then he finally just moves in and starts to hug her. And she's, I mean, it's just a scream. I had to put it there and I couldn't slow it. I had to try to get a frame from it. They just were so grainy or something, but it didn't matter because you could see Baba's sweet, loving delight just shining out at her. And you could just see her, just taking it in. So even in the graininess, it was clear, very clear to me. So I put those photos in anyway, just because of that. Betty, honey, what do you got?
I remember we got to know Agnes Barron pretty well at Meherabad, and Agnes and Margaret were great friends. They our friend Ruth Chase was her name. There was a 40-day silence up at a time when Baba had told people to keep silent, and so there was like a retreat up at Meherabad, and there are photos from that time. And I remember one with Margaret with a great big scythe cutting the grass on the they were just two of a kind, as I now. How do I know that? I think maybe talking to Agnes, they just were kind of on the same wavelength. A little cynical. That's all.
Yeah, I go for that. I hear that cynical piece. She was amazing. Well, anybody? If not, there we go. Ron, go ahead, sweet.
Yeah, I got another thing that happened to me after I moved to California. I went to one of the meetings that we had, and they showed the film of Baba in '56 that was taken by let's see, Charmian Deuce. Yeah, she took all those films, in the different places, and so this was at Holiday Lodge. This is where the film, that little tug of war with Margaret happened in Holiday Lodge, and she took a film of it that you could see everything about it, the whole Holiday Lodge area. And I mean, I was just quite taken. I mean, whenever I see that, it's really quite special, that playfulness that Baba had with Margaret. It just so happened that the very next day, my friend Peter Justin said, come on, we're gonna go to Holiday Lodge and I'll take you there to see it. And when we went there, it had not changed. And this was, I don't know, 25 years later or something like that. Maybe not even quite that long ago. But And being in there and seeing almost the exact images that were in the film just really flooded me with a sense of Baba's physical presence there. I mean, his physical presence, I don't think it diminishes that much very quickly. Just like at the center, you could feel it. And this was a place he stayed, like a week or something like that, which eventually it got torn down, I don't know, about 30 years later. But it was a gift, I felt, to be able to be taken there. You know, he just said, come on, I'll take you there. I had no idea what to expect. But to see the film, and then the very next day, when it was still fresh in my mind, to see that place, again, I believe Baba gave it to me as a gift, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Red.
Yeah, Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. All right. Well, if everyone's had a chance to, Rosalie? Yes, dear. Jai Baba. There you go.
Yeah, I was thinking different thoughts. This whole thing of not having met someone, or you miss someone, or you miss the avatar, or being in his physical presence, and you don't ever really know, because as strange as it might seem, you might not remember. Anything's possible, as you know, in life. Yeah, but I was thinking of Margaret, how he took her Achilles. That's symbolically your weak point, your Achilles. Her career ended. And also the strength of her when she got bit by that mad dog, that he would have the symptoms read out on the other side of where she was sleeping, and she could hear him. And you can imagine just the strength of someone to get through that. My feeling of going to India, you could get real sick there. And I didn't doubt it, but a mad dog, just, I think, in remembering these souls, which we are one with, right? It's like we're all triggers for each other, but the avatar is the trigger, and he makes all the other triggers happen, because he says, when I come, I stir, STIR. And, it just changes things. You don't stir something if you don't want it to happen, And I'm just thankful. And I always miss some of the dancers. You can't get them, but, I visit them. I just visited Ambika, and, her sense of and love, and her friendship, her living friendship with Margaret is so beautiful. I tease her because she's 95 now. Margaret left at 97. Ambika met her the year she left, and they had a close relationship. Beautiful. And I tease her. I says, I think you're going to at least live till 97, because, if Margaret had left at 95, you might not have met her. Anyway, I love that Margaret talks about the dance, and what she puts in her first book. She knew God was dance. And I had this painful experience one time about dance. I do love to dance. I'm totally unschooled, except I did Phyllis Frederick had the smarts, the intuition to bring Brenner Mail down, and he'd give us workshops. They were like so beautiful. And I almost sidetracked there because Mara asked Brenner when he was in India, and I was there at the same time. She wanted to see this dance that she had seen as a child and that she had participated in, I think, in like high school. She wanted to see, and then so Brenner was asked, what do you do? Well, Brenner was asked by Casey, and he said, no, I'm not going to try to get that together. And then when he found out that Mara actually wanted it, he says, well, there's no contest, he's gonna. And so I was there for this dance, and it was so incredibly beautiful. There were 8 women, and 4 of them were in pink saris, 4 were in blue, and they carried lanterns. And like Dr. Ann was one of them. Casey was in there, at Devana, just like, and it was in the amphitheater. It wasn't around MRTD, I'm not sure, but I know it was the amphitheater, and they put tiny little white lights the whole of the whole outline of the shell of the amphitheater. And this dance, people were like, oh, you hear all these sighs like, oh, it's like, it was like phenomenal. It's like, it puts you into childhood when you saw things and really just responded, don't have a big thought process. What is this? Whoa, whoa. And after it was over, Mara stood up and was, to tell Brenner he was still on the stage and how much she liked it. And I mean, just even if she didn't say anything, just Mara standing up, it was just so beautiful. And the next day he was leaving, or shortly after, and she wanted to give him a picture, one of those, and they're substantial, like it's a picture that's put on wood, so she kissed it first, and then she's holding it by its string to drop it in his hand. And I tell you, it was so amazing. He reminded me, if you've ever seen Goofy, Walt Disney Goofy, where he takes off his feet, leave the ground, and he's real goofy and just, I tell you, Brenner was off the ground. I mean, he must have been off the ground. He was like floating. Anyway, it was like, we're just so fortunate. We're just so fortunate. And however it comes to you about the avatar being here, that's a great good fortune. And it's not like I'm number 1 or number 2, or I'm on the tower and I'm the scour. It's like, I think Baba's just all of that, and Margaret was certainly a advocate of plain truth, plain beauty, just very much like accept herself as she was. And that it could be quite curt. I mean, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but the heart, like the heart of Margaret, I mean, she was just in love with God, yeah. Anyway, I just can't get those dancers here. I was interested about, if someone would come, you know.
Well, I've had a request for the video again, so
Oh, please, please.
Okay. end with that then. Jai Baba. So this is something that Monty actually wrote about Margaret, and Buzz Connor took and made a song. So here we go.
Dancer dancing to his word, footsteps winging as a bird, abandoned flight of blazing light, whirling in divine romance. Dancer, dancer, dance his dance. To the drum of God's heart, in which all music has its start, from creation's soundless singer to every gesture, every glance. Dance, dancer, dance, dance. In the power of his smile, you may want to rest a while, but keep on dancing. Dancer, please not to rush. His dance can never cease. Not to rush. His dance can never cease. Dancer dancing to his word, footsteps winging as a bird, abandoned flight of blazing light, whirling in divine romance. Dancer, dancer, dance his dance, dance his dance, his dance, dance his dance, dance his dance, his dance, his dance, dance his dance, his dance, dance his dance, dance his dance, his dance, his dance. dance, his dance, his dance, dance, his dance, his dance, oh dance, his dance, his dance, his dance, his dance, Nataraj's dance can never cease, never dancer dancing to his word, footsteps winging as a bird, abandoned flight of blazing light, whirling in divine romance, dancer, dancer, dancer.
Sorry. That beautiful guitar piece in the background is Mike Hansen, who played with Buzz on that song. And every time I hear it, it's just pretty spectacular. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that forward.
Thanks for playing it again, Ruth. It's such a treat to see all those beautiful photos.
Yeah, Susan and Daryl are here and they asked for it. So yeah, Rosalie.
I just wanted to say something that a quick of Margaret Craske was the godmother of Margaret Files, and shared this one time. Margaret told her, "You don't have to be good; you just have to be God."
Well, there's a good place to end. All right.
And begin.
And yeah, it's the beginning. Well, let's have a moment of silence then. Che Papa. Che Baba, if you'd like to.
Hey, Baba. Thank you, Ruthie and Karen, for offering such a wonderful opportunity to remember Baba through Miss Craske.
Glad you're here, Judy. Thank you for everything you brought. I didn't realize that you had spent time in Happy House.
My good fortune somehow. Yeah. And that was the beginning of my connection with text, which it was so enriching and delightful and so much laughter. We'd talk on the phone, whenever I was back in America, and just laugh and laughing is what I did with Tex.
This is language. I know. I know. I met him in India and we would go into the bazaar and he was so impressed with my bartering skills.
Uh-huh.
And I'd walk away and then, they'd call me back and then I'd get in the rickshaw and he'd be like, oh, that was just so good, so good. And we kind of, we had this wonderful connection as well. And then at the center, he taught me and somebody else this little walk. So you'd walk with your left foot, your right foot, your left foot, your right foot, your left foot, your right foot. And then the thing went, left my wife and 49 kids for an old gray mare and a pickup truck. Did I do right in the country where I came foot, hay foot, straw foot, skip by jingo, left. And we would go through the center trying to get that down, left. So many years passed now, and as everyone know, he lived in Myrtle Beach, and my friend Scott helped care for him some, and so we went out to lunch one time with Scott, and I wasn't sure if Tex would really even remember me. I mean, how many people he had met in his life, and so we sat there for a few minutes, and we were chatting, and then I looked at him and I said, "Left." Left my wife, and his face just broke into this big old grin. Yeah, he's
Oh, yes. And somehow the fact that we're laughing right now is just the perfect way to conclude a remembrance of Miss Craske and her delightful dancers.
yes. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, thanks.